Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Academic Job Search Process, an LRA Doc Student ICG webinar. The LRA Doc Student ICG is entering its 7th year of supporting graduate students as the newest members of the Literacy Research Association. In addition to hosting an annual study group at the LRA conference each December, we also sponsor a proposal mentoring project each spring, which matches graduate students with faculty members to coach them through the conference proposal process. Today we're launching a new initiative of the ICG in an attempt to connect members between annual conferences and as a way to discuss topics of relevance to literacy graduate students. So in this inaugural episode, we will discuss the process of getting and keeping an academic position, from where to look for job postings, how to best complete the application process, how to prepare for both virtual and on-site job talks, to negotiating the climate of your new department and preparing for that first tenure meeting. Our panelists are going to offer their suggestions and experience from multiple perspectives. So my name is Colleen Whittingham. I am a doctoral candidate at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I am currently serving as the senior co-chair of the Doc Student ICG. Joining us tonight, we also have Tiffany and Melanie, who are also co-chairs of the organization.
So hi, I'm Tiffany, serving as a co-chair. I am a third-year doctoral candidate at the University at Buffalo, and I'm very happy to be on tonight. So I hope you all enjoy.
Great, thank you. And Melanie is joining us also tonight. She's having some technical difficulties, so she's going to stay muted. But I also want to introduce to you Emily Hoffman. She is also of the University of Illinois at Chicago and a member of the LRA Doc Student ICG. Emily is producing the show tonight, and we are grateful for all of her technical support.
Thank you, everybody. It is my first time producing, so hopefully it turns out well.
So without further ado, I want to welcome our panelists. We're going to hear more from them tonight. Dr. Michelle Falter of North Carolina State University, Dr. Lee Hall from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and Dr. Christine Malozzi from the University of Kentucky. Welcome, and thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks. Okay, should we just go ahead and get started?
I think that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. So I'm Christine Malozzi, and I think I'm first up here. And I'm going to set a little timer for myself so I don't go over too much and take up too much space. I just want to let you know that I'm greeting you from a couple different perspectives. So I was thinking about when I went on my first academic job search. It was, I was searching in the fall of 2008 for a job for the academic year of 2009-2010, and everything was paper-based. Like, you may have found your job description online, but everybody was requesting, you know, like hard copy letters and hard copy vitas and you know, maybe scans of articles to be, you know, read and all this stuff. And in my most recent job search, which was this past fall, everything's electronic. So I mean, in 8 years, everything, you know, obviously more than that has changed, but it's just so different. So when I think about how I get organized for searching for a job in academia, one of the first things you want to know is where to find your job searches. And I know that, Colleen, I think you've got a Google Doc where we've got some of those resources, like looking in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, their little job section is called Vita, I think it is. Or, you know, Academic Keys is another website. And so there's those resources in that Google Doc. Those are good online sources to look at. But you need to also know how to search, which means that you need to know what you want. You need to know what kind of position you're looking for, whether you are looking for, you know, a research-intensive position, whether you're looking for a teacher-intensive position, whether you want to go into the K-12 system again, if you were there in the past, whether you want to look for a job in the humanities versus in education, or whether you think you want to go into something like a think tank, or whether you want to look for a postdoc. So you really need to have a sense of what you want so that you then know how to search, what search terms to use, and that sort of thing. Some of the jobs in literacy are going to be in areas of curriculum instruction. Some of them are going to be in, you know, like in some schools it might be even in the English department. So you just need to know what kinds of key terms that you might need to use. So reading, writing, literacy, trying to think of some others, you know, education as a search term. If you are an interdisciplinary scholar, you may be looking at things like, I know I was looking for things in the women's studies departments and programs, or in the qualitative research areas, or quantitative research. So again, you just have to know what you're looking for so that you then can use those search terms. You also need to think, another change, the first time I did a job search, I was straight out of my doctoral program, and I was married, but I didn't have any kids, and I was not geographically bound, so I could go anywhere in the world, really, and I looked internationally for jobs. That may or may not be the case for you. The second time I went on the job search, I'm still married. I have 2 children now, 2 dogs, 2 children. I'm older now. I have some more academic experience. So my search was very, very different. We were geographically bound this time, and it made a difference in the search. So again, you have to figure out what are your parameters, what are your goals for getting a job, and how flexible can you be? How flexible do you want to be? If you are in a program, let's say you're in a region and maybe you're at like a flagship university, let's say, and let's say you only want to get a job within 30 miles of that flagship university. Well, there are a lot of people in your same boat who also went to that flagship university, who also want to live in that town, and you just have to understand that you would be competing against each other. So again, think about all of those things when you are looking at calls for jobs. Okay, so when you read calls for jobs, you need to look at the subtext of those calls. Most universities, most departments, most programs put a lot of thought into how those calls are written. And if you are ignoring the language of the calls, then you likely will not be setting yourself up for success. So if they say they want somebody in digital literacies and you're like, I could get on the computer, sure, I know how to do that. Like, no, that's not it. They actually want somebody in digital literacies. Or if they say that this is a children's literature position and you think, well, I'm in content area literacy, but I use children's literature. Sure, I'm going to give it a shot. Like, they probably aren't looking for you per se. That is to say that in this climate of highly competitive, a highly competitive climate in academia, unfortunately, the universities have their pick. It's a buyer's market, I guess you would say, when it comes to that. At other stages of the game, maybe it was not that way. But now, you know, I know that I applied for a postdoc, and they had over 100 applicants for one postdoc. Well, that's just the reality. So they truly want somebody who is tailored to that job call. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying don't go for it, but you also need to be wary of the resources that you're spending in getting that application together. And, you know, academia, especially in somewhere like literacy, it's a very small world. and you just want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward. If you apply for every single thing that's out there, the message that you might be sending is that you don't know what you actually want, and you don't want that to be the message that gets out. So just be judicious in this climate. I would say that the calendar that you'd be looking at is if you are graduating in May or the summer for the next academic year to get a job, you're going to be, I have seen calls come out as early as July of the previous academic year. Now that's really early, but I've seen it. But a lot of calls are being put forth in, early September. Certainly by October, you've got deadlines coming in. They want those applications in October. And then you, at least in literacy, you've got the conference season gear up. So you might be writing things in your cover letters saying, I will be at NCTE. If anybody from your university, anybody from your program is there, I would love to have a conversation with that person. Or you might be saying, I'm going to be at LRA. I would love a chance to, discuss this opportunity with someone from the program. Sometimes there are conference, I call them like pre-interviews. I don't know if that's fair, but they are trying to touch base with many, many people at the conferences before sometimes they figure out who they want to bring to an on-campus interview. So that's something that you have to keep in mind calendar-wise. Also, if you're going on the job market, understand that if you are presenting at one of those conferences, it is likely that somebody from the search committee is going to show up at your talk and listen to the things you have to say. You are on stage, you are on a job interview during those conference sessions. They may not introduce themselves, but just understand that might be part of your interview process, informal though it may be. Let me think. I want to keep an eye on the time. Let me see. So one way to get organized with these calls is, just something simple like an Excel spreadsheet where you just put anything that you are possibly interested in with links to the online calls, and just stay very organized with your due dates, because you are going to need to have letters of recommendation, and you want to give those people who you're requesting letters from as much lead time as possible to write those letters. And those people will also want to know exactly what the call is, what the job search description is that they might be writing for. So just have those things available to the people who are writing your recommendations, and that's going to be very helpful. That call, that job search, needs to be right next to you while you are writing your own cover letter, because you want to know that you are addressing the things in the job search that they are asking for. As you write your cover letter, which at this stage, if you are just, and other people might have different thoughts about this, but if you are just graduating out of your doctoral program, you might want like a 2 to 3 page cover letter, maybe something like that. Probably like I think I did 2. Lee's saying no. All right, Lee, I'll let you talk. What do you think, Lee? What do you think about that? 1? All right, we disagree. So I think like a 2-page cover letter. Lee can chime in. And then like once you get more experience, maybe your cover letter grows a little bit. So that's my take on that. Let me think. Okay, so I'm going to pass the baton and let Michelle chime in, just so that we have a chance to get to some of your questions. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself for right now, and Michelle, it's up to you.
Sounds good. So hi, I am Michelle Falter, and I'm coming to you from the perspective of a newly graduated well, I was a doctoral student. Now I'm a professor, which is pretty exciting. So I was on the job market during my final year of completing my PhD, like many of you probably are. And so I think I have a lot of insights about how to do it and some of the things that I didn't do very well. But I was successful in getting a tenure track position at a Research One university. Um, and so I have some things that I want to share with you. One thing I want to say is that um, being on the job market is a full-time job in itself. So I was working on my dissertation, finishing that up. I also had a part-time job in a local high school. And so I had a lot of different balls in the air, and it was a lot to manage. And you need to really be very organized in order to kind of keep everything in order and on track for getting things done. So like Christine said, one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you is to get organized by using folders. Dropbox was a great thing for me. For every position that I was interested in applying, I had a separate folder that had information for the position that I was applying for. So I did a lot of research on those positions, on the people that work there, on the publications that they had, on the mission of the school itself. Anything that I could really think of that might help me to understand the position and the school itself and how I might be able to add to the culture of that school. And I put those things in a folder. I also had a Google spreadsheet where I kept track of all the different parts of the application that would help me to write my cover letter. So to kind of add on to what Christine was talking about with the cover letter, I know one of the questions that was raised was what goes into a cover letter. So it kind of depends on the position that you're applying for. And so if you're applying for a research track position, you're going to want to talk about the research that you've done. If you've worked with an advisor on research projects, what were they? What were the methods that you were using? If you are in your dissertation mode, talk about what your dissertation research is and how you're going to continue that research. What are you going to write about based off of that research? What conferences you might be going to. Other things you might want to talk about is if you have been working on grants and any kind of major presentations that you've done. On top of that, you should also talk about your teaching, but if it's a research position, that might be a little less of your cover letter than would be if you were in a teaching position, where you should really talk about the strengths of your pedagogy, what are the skills and different sort of strategies that make you who you are as a teacher. If you have any awards for your teaching or for your research, those would be things to include in the cover letter. You should also, again, try to address every single bullet point of the required elements of the job call. And sometimes they might have required elements, and then they might have some elements that they would like but are not necessarily required. The more of those things that you can talk about, the better it is for you. And I would also echo that you really need to know what kind of job that you want. And you should really only apply to jobs that you seriously could see yourself working at, because you don't want to waste the school's time, and you also don't want to waste your time, because it is a lot of work. Researching the schools, learning about the different classes that they offer, thinking about who the people are that might be your colleagues and how you might be able to work with them. All those things take a lot of time to put together. And your cover letter should really be kind of unique to each of those schools and what they're looking for. There might be some elements that would be in each of those cover letters, but really they should be unique to each position. So another thing that a lot of people want to know about is, so what happens after you turn in the whole application? So usually the application is the cover letter. They might ask for samples of writing. They might ask for a syllabi. They might ask for a teaching philosophy, a research statement, a diversity statement. Those are all different things that different schools ask me for. And it just really depends on the school, like I said, the institution. So once that goes in, it's really a waiting game. And it can be very kind of frustrating because you want to know, am I moving forward or what's happening? But it really is just something that you're just going to have to wait for. And sometimes it can be up to a month. And sometimes you don't hear back at all. So realize that that might be part of the process. And so if you don't make the next cut, they might not tell you. But if you do make the next cut, then typically what it is either a phone or a Skype interview. And so you usually don't have a choice. They usually tell you which of the two it will be. You're lucky if you do get a choice, I guess. I personally preferred the phone interview versus Skype. And part of the reason was that I could have lots of different items sitting out around me to kind of help me stay on track of what points I wanted to make. But you really don't have that option, so you just have to prepare for whatever it is. If it was a Skype one, then sometimes I would post things behind my computer just as reminders to help me stay on track with what I wanted to talk about. So those interviews are sometimes about 20 to 30 minutes, and every person that they interview will get the exact same questions. Usually it's about 5 questions, and then they will ask you if you have any questions. And you definitely need to use that opportunity to ask questions. So questions that I would ask would be things like, could you tell me about the students at this school? How would you describe them? Could you tell me what are the strengths of this department, and what are some of the goals that this department has for the future? Another question I would ask in that interview would be, tell me about your tenure and promotion at your school. What is valued here? All of those things are really helpful for you to figure out if you want to move forward, if they ask you for the next round of interviews. And you have to remember, this is a two-way street. So just while they're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them to figure out if you fit best with that school or not. So if you're fortunate enough to move forward, the next step would be a campus interview. And campus interviews vary in length from, I had one that was a day and a half to one that was 3 full days. And so, it's a lot of time that goes into both on the university side and on your side in preparing for somebody to come to campus. And again, depending on the kinds of institution that it is, will really kind of, vary the types of things that you'll be doing at the actual campus interview. So at a Research One interview, you will give a job talk, which is basically a research presentation that is a longer version of what you might give at a conference, but really focused on, kind of what your interests are and where you're thinking about moving forward and how you fit in with that school and the things and the colleagues that you potentially will have there. You will have definitely meetings with the dean, the department head, usually members of the search committee, sometimes graduate students you'll meet with, sometimes undergraduate students. You will definitely eat a lot at different places. So bring your appetite, even though you will be talking the whole time. And sometimes you'll have meetings with different, people who help you write grants, etc. If you're going to a teaching college, you will definitely do some sort of a teaching demo. Sometimes that demo is in front of colleagues, which is sometimes feels a little awkward, but usually it is in front of a class. They actually give you a class that you go in and teach a topic. In the places that I interviewed, they gave me a topic ahead of time, and then I could do what I wanted with the students during that time. And just know that when you do that, the students are evaluating you just as much as the search committee is, which will also be in the room. What do you wear? So sometimes people ask that. For me, when I flew in, I typically wore just a really nice outfit. I wasn't overly dressed. I didn't have like a suit or anything. For me, it was a nice dress because I'm a female, but if I were a male, it would be just like dress slacks. I always think of like, what would I wear as a teacher for my students? And so just like maybe nice Sunday dress would be pretty typical. I wanted to be comfortable on the plane, and typically they take you out for dinner that first night, and then you get to go home and prepare. But then the rest of the time, I was usually wearing a blazer and either pants or a dress, depending on the weather of the place I was going to. Another thing that some people don't know is that some schools will pay for the campus interview up front, and other places will reimburse you. So as a doctoral student, this can sometimes be a big deal because we don't have a lot of money. So just know that ahead of time you might be putting a good amount of things on your credit card. The good news is that the schools will pay you back, but one of the schools that I applied to, it took 4 months. So just know that sometimes it's slow in getting your money back. I think, okay, the next step after that is if you're fortunate enough to get offered a job. So I was actually very fortunate, and I had 2 job offers. So I was able to really think through and to even better negotiate for the job that I currently have. But even if you're just lucky enough to have 1 job offer, which is awesome, what you need to know is this, from my perspective and what I've been told by my advisors and peers, is that usually the dean is the person who would call you to offer you the job. And you never want to accept the job right away. You say to them, thank you for that wonderfully kind offer. I would like the opportunity to think it over. And then they usually will tell you what they're going to offer you. And that gives you an opportunity to think through what it is that you value and what do you need in order to be successful at that institution. Basically, whatever the offer is, it is always negotiable. There's something that is negotiable. But depending on the type of institution it is, you might not be able to negotiate for certain things. So at a research university, I can negotiate for a larger startup package, which could be a graduate student or more money to do different kinds of research projects or things like that. Startup packages at teaching universities are not as negotiable, but you might be able to negotiate your salary by a little bit or your course release. Some of the things that I negotiated for were a slightly higher salary, some summer pay, a course release for 2 years. But basically anything is negotiable within reason. And you have to remember, you don't want to insult the people who have just wanted to hire you. So you really have to be thinking strategically about what do you really need. And obviously advocate for yourself, but also realize you're going to be working with people and you don't want to start off on the wrong foot. So I think that's where I'll stop for right now until we'll give Lee a chance to talk about from her perspective, and then if there's questions. So Lee.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of the search committee. I've been on numerous search committees, and I have been on search committees as both a chair and also as just a member. But I've been on a lot of them. And I'm going to talk about it. I've got it broken down into 3 different steps. So the first one, thinking about how does the search committee view your application before you even make it to the Skype interview, right? What are we looking for when we've got, right, like 100 applications? And Christine's right. You know, she said there's like 100 applications for a single postdoc, and I think in our last search we had 70-something applications for, I think it was an open rank position, but it's still pretty normal. So I'm going to start off by talking about what are we doing when we have this big pile of applications, how do we make sense out of it? And then I'm going to talk about what are we thinking when we're having that Skype or phone interview with you, and how do we evaluate that? And then I'm going to move into talking about the campus interview and how we make sense out of that, and what things that we're looking for, things that I'm looking for, because that's really all I can tell you. And then how we think about evaluating people that come to campus. All right, so first of all, if it sounds scary that there are 70 to 100 applicants for a position, I totally get that, but the good news is that most of them are completely not relevant to the job. So maybe that'll make you feel a little bit better. So there will be people that apply to these jobs that are completely out of field, like they want a job, they just said, hey, what the heck, and they threw their hat into the ring. There'll be people like Christine described, like, you know, you're in continuity literacy, but this is a children's lit position, and so, you know, you probably won't make the cut. So really, we can take an applicant pool of 70 to 100 people and easily cut it down to 20 to 30 people just based on qualifications. Do you have the appropriate qualifications? And also based on, are you a match for this position, right? Are you, you know, a continuity literacy person applying for a children's lit position, right? That sort of thing. All right, so we'll start with that. Then, as we're going through the material, so Christine was talking about the cover letter, and I was trying to pantomime. I think 1.5 pages is a pretty good amount. I think 2 pages is okay. I would definitely, as a doctoral student, I don't think you need to go over 2 pages. You're probably saying too much. If I get something that's 5 pages or 4 pages, and occasionally I do, I probably roll my eyes and think, oh my gosh, what is this? Because it's not going to be very concise. You want to do all the things that Christine and Michelle have talked about, in the sense that, you know, you want to look at the job application, you want to address the things that we want, that are required in the job application, and you want to put the things that we want, that we're looking for, in the language that we use. So if we're saying children's literature or continuity literacy or digital literacies, then you want those terms to be coming up in your cover letter. That's really helpful. But you also want to be really concise. So you should absolutely talk to us about your dissertation, like Michelle said, but you don't need to go on about your dissertation for an entire page, right? Like probably a paragraph, maybe 2, and then you need to move on to something else, right? And we're also going to be looking if you have a dissertation defense date. So you can say that in your cover letter. You can, you know, tell us where you are in terms of data collection, data analysis, writing it up. If you've got a defense date set, that's even better. You should put that right in there. If you know that you're going to be graduating in May, maybe you don't have a defense date set, but you're like, I'm definitely going to be graduating in May, this is going to happen. You can put that in there. Any indication that you can give us as to where you are on your timeline is going to be helpful, because we don't want to bring somebody in that is nowhere near finished with their dissertation and isn't going to finish their dissertation. Not at a place like Carolina, where you have to come in and you really have to hit the ground running. Other places might be open to that. We are less open to that. You know, if you're going to defend, as long as you defend before your position starts, we're good with that. We don't care if it's, you know, February or July. As long as you're done before you walk in the door, that's really what we care about, because your tenure clock starts, you got to start. You can't have the dissertation hanging over your head. So we want to know, we're going to want to know about that. Strong letters of recommendation are going to be important, and I would suggest that you meet with your advisor and really think this through and be strategic about who is going to write your letters for you, why are they going to write them, and what are they going to represent you. And let me reword that a little bit better. How are they going to represent you, right? So maybe, right, your advisor should be able to give like this really great big picture perspective of you and also talk about you in really nuanced ways. But then maybe there's somebody else that can really talk about your teaching. Or maybe there's somebody that, you know, you've worked with very closely on a research project. So think about who you want to have write letters and actually talk to those people and tell them, this is what I'm hoping you can speak to about in your recommendation letter. I know that if I'm writing a recommendation letter for somebody, if they can give me some guidelines in terms of what they want me to highlight about them, then that's great, and I am more than happy to do that. So meet with your advisor and come up with a plan for what you think those letters should look like and who you think should write them. And then the other thing that I'm going to say about this is, and I'll tell you what I think about it, but this is just the reality of it I'm finding, is they're going to want you to have, at an R1, they're going to want you to have a publication. And here's my thoughts on this. My thoughts on this is, as a committee member, I do want you to have a publication, but I really don't care what the publication is. Okay, so ideally it's going to be peer reviewed, but I don't care if you're first author, I don't care if you're third author, I don't care if you wrote with other doctoral students or if you wrote with other professors. What I like about the fact that you have, and I don't care what tier journal it's in, okay? What I like about the fact that you have a publication is that you understand what it means to go from start to finish on a paper, okay? And you understand how long it takes, and you understand how long it takes before it comes out and, you know, and is published, so that when you show up, you understand that this is something that you're going to have to keep at and keep doing on a regular basis to get tenure. So I think it's nice if you have a publication. I think I'm a little more lenient in terms of what that publication looks like than other people are, but I will tell you that you will be competing against other doctoral students that have multiple publications, and some of them will be single author publications, and they will be in decent journals. So that's the reality of it, and that will give those, if you don't have that, the people that do can easily get the edge up if it's really close between trying to figure out who we want to talk to first. And then I do want to highlight, Christine said we show up at conferences to see you. Absolutely. Sometimes we might have like 3 or 4 people that we want to go see, and some people are presenting at the same time, so you won't know, because it'll be, you know, a doctoral student went to your presentation, you know, from our university and took notes on it and came back and said what they thought. And if they came back and said that you were great and they were raving about you, that's awesome. And if they came back and said that your presentation was a dud, that's not so good. So you're always on. As soon as you start submitting applications, you should just assume that when you're in front of a room full of people, somebody from the search committee or somebody that is connected with the university in some way is looking at you. All right, so then moving on to the phone Skype interview. We have moved to doing the Skype interviews. And like Michelle said, it's not an option. And we typically pin it down to maybe 1, sometimes 2 days. And we'll send people a list of times that are available, and that's it. So our Skype interviews are 15 minutes. I think that we can get everything we need to know about if you should be considered to move on to the campus interview or not in 15 minutes. So let's see here. If you get on the Skype interview, the thing to know is answer the question being asked. I cannot say that enough. Answer the question being asked. And we may ask you some really difficult questions. We may ask you some really easy ones. Usually everybody from the search committee has a question prepared. We don't always ask them. What we do is we might have, I think we typically have 5 people on a search committee, maybe 4. And each person will have a question that they're going to ask that we've crafted together as a committee. And we'll have a question about your research. And that could be asking you to talk about your field that you situate yourself in, your little niche. We might ask you some specific questions about that and how you connect it to the job. We will usually ask you to discuss your dissertation. We will ask you where you see yourself going after your dissertation. I don't think it has to be a 5-year plan. I know that's a question that people get asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So it's probably a good idea to, be able to answer that kind of a thing. But I just like knowing that you've kind of thought about what you're finding in your dissertation and what that's making you think of in terms of studies beyond your dissertation. We'll ask you either definitely at a campus interview, maybe in a Skype interview if you've thought about places where you would publish your work, and we'll ask you to talk about that a little bit. But Skype interviews are short. We'll ask you maybe some things about your teaching, what kind of classes you teach, what you're interested in teaching. We'll ask you if you have any questions for us. Just, ask us something simple that looks like you paid attention to what's on our website, okay? It's not anything complicated. You can ask if we're starting up a new program, even if you don't think you're going to be teaching in it, you can just ask about it. You can just say, hey, I was on your website, I saw you're going to be starting this new program. I know maybe it's a little outside of my area, but I was just really interested in it. Can you tell me about it? Whatever, right? Because it's a direction that they're going in. So any kinds of questions that you can have to ask. I would not suggest asking about the tenure process, because that's really a on-campus interview question that it's something you should be hearing about when you're on campus, and it's a good question to ask when you're on campus. If you're not coming to campus, then I wouldn't worry about getting into anything like that. You can also ask, before we get off the phone with you, you can ask us what our timeline is. And I highly recommend you do that. So we can't be super specific with you because these things aren't always in our control. And sometimes I'm sitting around waiting for the dean to give me approval, and he's out of town. And there's all these little delays that are going behind the scenes that have nothing to do with any candidate whatsoever. They just happen to deal with HR requirements and getting people to sign off and making sure everybody's paperwork in agreement, we're good to go kinds of things, getting permission. So ask for a timeline, and people might say things like, well, we're hoping to bring candidates out in November or bring candidates out in January. And, even then, if you don't hear anything, just know that there's probably some behind the scenes stuff that's going on that may be delayed. All right. And then I'm going to talk about the in-person interview. So with the in-person interview, and Michelle hit on this a lot, so be prepared, know something about where you're going, right? Know something, you should know something about your search committee members. I always had a notebook, and I had like a page where I would write notes about the search committee members, like who's on the committee. Is it somebody in English ed? What's their background? Just some key words about their general areas of interest. If it was a really famous person, I'd probably make sure I read a piece or two just so I could talk to them. I'm not saying that because, I don't need you to go read my work to make me feel good about myself, but I'm just saying it shows an interest that you have, that you've taken in people. I would look through the programs that I might expect to teach in that may or may not be outlined in the job description. You may or may not have been told. And write down courses that I thought I would be interested in teaching so that I could talk to people about that, ask people questions about that. I would ask about the tenure process when you are there. Usually the search committee tries to fill you in on that and make you aware of that. That's also a question you can ask a department chair. That's also a question you can ask a dean. We always try to make sure that people that are interviewing for assistant professor jobs get to meet with other assistant professors. It doesn't have to be somebody that's in your field. It just has to be some other assistant professors so that you can talk to them about what it's like to be an assistant professor at this institution. And you should ask them about the tenure process, but then you should also ask people that are tenured there about the tenure process. You'll get 2 different perspectives, but that will help you. All right. You are going to have to give a talk. It's going to be, where I am, you're going to have to give a research talk. You're going to talk about your dissertation. Typically, those last 60 minutes. I tell people you can have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 minutes to talk, and then we'll reserve what's left over for questions. Our talks are well attended because we serve lunch. I think that was a good move. And our dean comes to, well, we're getting a new dean, so I don't know about our new dean, but our prior dean came to every single talk. I only saw him miss one talk one time. It just couldn't be helped. And we record all the talks, and they are posted, they're saved online, but they're in a secure place online, so only faculty can get in and access them. And I remember telling, and it was a doctoral student, I said, our dean, is meeting with you, but he can't be at the talk for whatever reason. And I said, he will watch this video. And I know he watched that video. And people do go in and watch the videos. Some people do it because they want to rewatch. They were there, but they want to rewatch a certain aspect of your talk because they have some questions or interest. And some people that could not be there will go in and watch your talk. So if you have your talk videoed, just be aware that you should assume that somebody's going to watch it, and it could be somebody pretty important. Follow the directions on your talk. So whatever parameters they give you, follow them. So nothing ticks me off more than saying you've got 40 to 50 minutes, and at 60 minutes I have to come up and yank the mic out of your hand, right? I'm like, we gotta get moving. We gotta go. We can't keep doing this. So usually somebody keeps time for you, but figure out a way to make it work. I am not super concerned if you are the best speaker in the world because I assume that you are new. I assume that you haven't given a lot of, I make a lot of assumptions about you, but they all work out in your favor. So I assume you're new. I assume you're terrified. If it's your first job interview, on-campus interview, you can tell us. Like I as a search chair, like I want to know that, and you don't have to tell the whole committee, but you could tell the chair. And as the chair, like I tell the other committee members, and I don't want to say that we're nicer to you. Like I don't want to say we go easy on you. We still ask you and treat you the same way we would treat everybody else, but I think it makes people a little more compassionate to know that it's your first interview and a little more empathetic. We kind of assume that you're terrified. Even if you're not.
Hey Lee, can I mention something? So you were mentioning your job talk, and I forgot to say this. Practice your job talk before you get to the interview. So make sure that you gather your friends together, encourage your department wherever you are to say, hey, do you mind if you just let everybody know I'm going to do a practice job talk at noon on Tuesday? Can you show up at the conference room and give me feedback? Because that's a really good way to get those jitters out and get some feedback in a low pressure situation. And so I just forgot to mention that.
And I would echo the same thing. I did that with my peers, and actually my peers were harder on me in the best possible way. They gave me lots and lots of critical feedback, but it prepared me so well for any type of question that anybody would possibly ask me. So definitely do that, because it will highlight things that you are not realizing that you're doing or saying, and it's just good practice to do that. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, so, and I would agree with all that. And I would say, again, I want to stress the answer the question being asked point, because that's going to be the case throughout your entire on-campus interview, but it's also going to especially be the case when you're in the room. And you might, sometimes people ask weird questions, honestly. And sometimes people ask questions, and I'm telling you, the rest of the room is going, that person's talk was not about that at all. Were you even listening? Just know that, like, don't take it personally. Like, just do your best to be polite and handle the question to the best of your ability. My advisor, I remember, told me to say things along the lines of, you know what, that is a really great point that I had not considered, and I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna think about that, right? Like, it's okay. You don't have to have all the answers, but definitely attempt to engage with all the questions to the best of your ability. And then I'm going to say two more things, and then I'm going to be done. When you're on campus, use it as an opportunity to ask the same question to different people. All right. So, and you might tweak it a little bit depending on who you're talking to, but that was one of my favorite things to do because I would ask the same question and make sure that the answers aligned. Because if the answers didn't really align, then that sent a red flag to me that something was going on. Usually the answers did align, and also when I would ask the question again, it just usually people added something to it that the first person didn't, right? So somebody else had a little more knowledge, you know, and so it was very helpful. After the interviews are over, you can ask, again, you can ask the search committee, because you'll have a search committee meeting. You can ask the search committee what their timeline is for making a decision. And you could be the first person in the door, which means you got to wait for everybody else to come through the door. Or you could be, you know, anywhere along that continuum. And they'll have again, it's a general sense. But the way that decisions get made in terms of who's going to be given the offer or who's going to be given the offer first, because sometimes we might like everybody. And so that's going to vary depending on the institution, right, how these decisions get made and who gets offered the job. But like it's been, I think it was Michelle that said this, that you're going to get a call from the dean. You're not going to get a call from the chair of the search committee. You're going to get a call from the dean. If you don't make the cut, right, if you get cut at any point in the process or if you make it all the way to the end and then you don't get the job, the search committee chair cannot tell you the reason why. At least we cannot at UNC. And that's because of human resources rules. I don't know the exact thing. I just know that if you email me or call me and say, hey, I want to know why I didn't get the job, I just say, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to share that information with you. And that's an HR policy at UNC. So. All right, so it's exhausting. It's fun-ish, I think. You get to eat a lot of good food. You get to stay in some nice hotels. And you get to sit in a room where people are forced to hear about your dissertation. So really, you know, what could be better?
That's great. Thank you so much. All of you have offered such really wonderful, varying perspectives on the process, and we appreciate that. We do have time for a few questions, and I am grateful for the Google Doc that we put out there. A number of students have offered some things that we maybe have already touched on, so we won't address those. But maybe, Christine, you can start with this question since you were just recently on the market, and I know you mentioned how it had changed since the last time. There's some questions about how your social media presence or your online presence plays into your marketability. If having a website is a necessity, if it's a luxury, what kind of content to include, those kinds of things.
Gosh, I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that. Does anyone have? I mean, I can. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say that for me, if you have academia.edu or ResearchGate, when I was on the job market, the amount of hits to my page went up exponentially. So search committees do search for you to see what they can see. You know, I think it depends on the institution, but I definitely know that they were looking at what was out there. And so you want to keep those things up to date if you have them, but if that's not your thing, then I also wouldn't say just make one. Because that's not you. So you need to present who you are.
Yeah, I was going to add, I agree with what Michelle said. I will Google you and see what comes up. But I don't think, and maybe this is just because everybody on the search committee is so old. I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I actually think that it's important to think about how you're represented on social media, and I think it's a really good idea to have some kind of a presence on social media that is education related. However, there's any number of ways that you can, you know, frame that and present yourself, and I don't think any one of them is wrong or better than the other. It's just about how you go about doing it and what works for you. But I have never seen any search committee that I've been on really care about it. But I think that it's a generational thing, and I think eventually that's going to start to shift.
Okay.
I think it should shift.
Great. Thank you. Lee, maybe a question more for you about when and how to broach the subject of spousal or partner hires.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I suck at that. Okay, so
Hard.
Yeah, it is. It's really hard. That is something that comes into play with the dean, because it's not anything that the search committee can do for you or a department chair can do for you. I don't think I'd make it known in my letter, because you're really just trying, when you're writing your cover letter, that is just about who you are and how you fit, or, right, it's up to the committee to decide how you do or do not fit with the job description. So I wouldn't put the spousal part in that. That's going to happen at the interview, and you're going to have to decide if you're comfortable bringing that up with the dean at the interview. You can also wait until you get the job offer and bring it up. So when I was on the job market a long, long time ago, I was married and I didn't know what to do, and I brought it up after I got the job offer. Our dean at the time was really nice, and I think he would have liked it if I had brought it up when I was meeting with him, but he still was able to work something out that worked for, worked for as long as it needed to work for, until he could find something that was a better fit for him. But the other thing to understand too is that, we used to do spousal hires. That wasn't typically too much of an issue, but our resources are so stretched right now that we can't do them anymore. Like we don't have the resources, and we've had to pass on people that we wanted to hire that had a great spouse that we would have loved to have hired, because we just don't have resources to do it.
Can I, along the lines of the whole negotiation and things like that, I also wanted to put a plug in for a book called Women Don't Ask, which is by Babcock and Lashire, I think it is. Maybe not, maybe it's Shear. But anyway, the title is Women Don't Ask, and it's probably appropriate for anybody that if you're in a negotiation situation at all, like asking for something without having a reason that you want it, it just seems silly. Like if you're like, well, I really want a window in my office. Well, why? I mean, you have to have a reason for that. Or, something like if you are going to negotiate your salary base, you really need to have done some homework and see what are new hires with your education level getting, perhaps in your department, in your college. And a lot of states are open records states. So one of the questions you might ask is this an open records state? And if they say yes, you can say, can you tell me the name of the website where I can find those open records? And you can go in and you can search for people's salaries if it's a public university, a public institution. And so that is going to give you information that can help you with negotiations. So, if there have been, perhaps if you know of spousal hires that have occurred in the past, that is something that you might say, I know that they have happened in the past. I'm not sure if it is still something that is occurring. You just want to be armed with the information. You don't want to ask without having your reasons.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in on talking about negotiations too. So somebody had asked a question, do you negotiate over the phone or on email? For me personally, I felt much more comfortable doing that over email, and it was recommended to me to do it that way, because sometimes it can be uncomfortable as a woman, particularly, to ask for the things that we want. And so I wrote an email that broke down all the points of the contract offer that was given to me, and either said, I really appreciate what you offered here. I think that that's wonderful. Or here's what I would like instead, and here's my reasons for it. So another reason to negotiate salary, as Christine said, you should look up what new assistant professors are making there, and make sure that your salary is equivalent to that. But also know how much the cost of living is for your area, to make sure that it's a livable wage. you can negotiate higher based on that. But basically, I did it point by point through an email, and that just made me feel a lot more comfortable. So I think it's just a matter of your comfort level. For me, it worked better over email.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have one here that came in that is a little bit of a unique situation, but I think it's unique to a lot of people. So we're gonna put it out there. If you are late to the job application process, as in you started applying for things in January, you don't get an offer by the end of the summer, does this ruin your timing? They said. That is to say, some scholars go as far as to say that one should not submit their final revised successfully passed dissertation to the graduate school until they have a job so as to avoid the gap year. What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, like that wouldn't occur to me to hold off. I think that if somebody were looking at you as an applicant,
Yeah.
They want to see, like, you can still be publishing and working even if you don't have a job. The publication process takes kind of so long anyway that by the time it actually comes out in print, you might have an institutional affiliation, or you can always make the argument that you were publishing this as a doctoral student, and that is the affiliation you're going to use for publication. So I would never even consider it a gap year. Does anyone have, I think they're going to be looking for holes in your vita, and if you are working and putting your nose to the grindstone, you won't have any holes in your vita.
Great. Okay, thank you. Well, we want to keep to our time. I have one final question that came in that might be nice for each of you to offer your perspective on, and that is just that this can certainly be a long and grueling process, as you've said, and how do you keep your spirits up? How do you remain positive through that process, maybe on both sides of the coin, right? Lee, I'm sure it's frustrating in your position too when you're not finding a good match. So maybe if you wouldn't mind taking that as the last question to wrap up for the evening, just on a positive note, how do you take care of yourself during this process?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I did to take care of myself. Okay, here's one thing that's going to make your life easier. I don't know if you can make it happen for you or not, but if you can, I highly recommend it. That is not my dog. One of the things that I noticed when I was a doctoral student was, right, doctoral students ahead of me were going on the job market, they were completely frazzled, they were running around, they're going to interviews, the application process, and then trying to write and defend their dissertation. And so what I managed to do was I managed to get my dissertation written and submitted to my committee by the end of December. I didn't defend until March because that was when we could get a date organized, but I was on the job market, and that was my job, because like Michelle said, it's a full-time job, and so I wasn't running around and having to try to figure out how I'm going to do my dissertation, how I'm going to write it, and that took a load off my shoulders. So I think anything that you can do that will minimize any stress that you have, if that is taking time for yourself to go running, to go for a walk, or whatever it is that you do, you still have to do those things for yourself. So,
yeah, I will just say that if that is a possibility for you to get that your dissertation written early, I would definitely do that, because the interviews process does take up a lot of your time. That wasn't an option for me, so I was running myself ragged, like she was just describing. And so for me, it really was about having a wonderful support system. I'm lucky enough to have some really great classmates and friends here at the University of Georgia who just kept me sane and pulled me out of my apartment and made me do something fun every once in a while. So I think you just have to find whatever it is that is going to make you happy. Some nights it was just a glass of wine for me that kept me sane. So. But if you are able to, I think Lee's suggestion is a fabulous one.
So I'm going to make 2 points. So one is that this job situation, the search, and then finding the right job, it's an issue of it being a marriage, that it's got to be right. Like, you wouldn't just want to take a job that's not right. You wouldn't want to marry somebody that's not right. You know, if asking your major professor is like asking them out to the prom, you know, this is like marrying somebody, you know, getting that job. So it's got to be right. So just understanding that if something doesn't work out, if you didn't get the job that you really, really, really wanted, something wasn't right. And there are politics going on that you have no idea about, and it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the situation that you walked into. So, like a marriage, you want it to be right. And then the other point I want to make is when you are actually interviewing, thinking about you know, those long marathon days, pack snacks. Snacks that will make you feel good and will feed your brain. And take, you know, it's just another form of, sounds silly, but it's another form of self-care when you are in the midst of it, to be like, I'm going to eat that Snickers bar or whatever, piece of fruit. So take care of your body, and you will also take care of your mind. Don't eat the Snickers.
That's really great. Great advice. I think Snickers or fruit, either way. Really, really helpful. We as an organization, we obviously are always looking to those who have gone before us to offer their advice, their insight, and to share their experiences. So this is certainly one of many conversations I'm hoping that we will be having using this platform. We want to thank everyone who was able to join us. Particularly, thank you to Emily for producing the show for us today. Thank you to Lee and to Christine and to Michelle. Congratulations on recent positions by two of you on our panel here. So thank you so much again for joining us. And if you have any questions, we will continue to keep that Google Doc open. We'll share that link on Twitter so that the conversation here can continue, but we look forward to meeting up in another episode soon. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.